Have you ever looked at a job's salary and just thought to yourself, how in the world did they come up with that number? It can feel completely random, like a total mystery. Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that mystery. We're diving into the hidden system companies use to figure out who gets paid what. Okay, so check this out. On the left, you've got a benefits counselor starting out making $30,000. As they get more responsibility, the pay bumps up to $36,000, then $50,000, but then bam, look at that leap to manager of benefits at $68,000. What is going on with those big jumps? Right? That's the big question here. Are they just throwing darts at a board? Or is there actually a logical process behind all this? And the answer, which might surprise you, is yes. There is absolutely a system. And here it is. This is the big idea that turns that chaos into clarity. It's a principle called internal consistency. The whole goal is to build a pay structure where every single job makes sense when you compare it to every other job inside that company. It's all about creating a system that's logical and fair from the inside out. So if you're going to build that kind of logical structure, where do you even begin? Well, you can't really compare jobs until you understand what they are deep down. And that brings us to our first section, how you actually take a job apart, piece by piece. The number one tool for this is called job analysis. You can think of it like detective work. The key here is that it's purely descriptive. We're not judging anything yet. We're just trying to capture every single detail of what a person in that job actually does. It's like creating a super detailed blueprint for the job. And it all starts at the most microscopic level. We're talking about something called an element. This is the smallest single action you can think of. Seriously, like the simple motion of just plugging a USB drive into a computer. That's an element. Now, you take a bunch of those tiny little elements, string them together, and you get a task. So all those individual finger movements on the keys, they combine to become the task of, say, keyboarding a memo. You see where this is going, right? You bundle up a whole collection of different tasks, and suddenly you've got a position. So one person is responsible for keyboarding memos, filing documents, and answering the phone. Their specific role is the position of clerk typist. Okay, now let's zoom out. If you have 3 people all working as a clerk typist, they all share the same job. Now, group that job with other similar ones, like a file clerk, and you have a job family. And all of that ladders up to a big picture occupation like office support. So just like that, we went from a tiny action to a whole career path. And believe me, this isn't something that's done casually over a lunch break. It is a formal, rigorous process. HR departments have to plan out the whole program, train analysts to be completely objective, and then go out and conduct actual studies, interviews, observations before they can even think about writing a final job description. And they've got some pretty incredible tools to help them out. This right here is one of the best, ONET. It's this massive online database from the US Department of Labor, and it's basically an encyclopedia for any job you can imagine. It gives everyone a common language to talk about what a job actually is. Okay, so we have successfully deconstructed a job. We've got the blueprint. But that's really only half the story. Now comes the much harder part. How do you figure out what that job is actually worth to the company? And this slide right here gets to the absolute heart of the matter. It's the difference between job analysis and job evaluation. See, job analysis is all about the what. What is this job? But job evaluation, that's where judgment comes into play. It asks that much trickier question. What is this job worth compared to everything else? Now, when I say judgment, I don't mean it's just a gut feeling. It's actually a very structured process based on something called compensable factors. These are just the specific things about a job that a company decides are valuable and are therefore the things they're willing to pay money for. And while every company can have its own unique recipe, they almost always boil down to these 4 big ones, which actually come from old labor laws. You've got skill, effort, that can be mental or physical, responsibility, and of course the working conditions. Okay, so we know we need to evaluate jobs using these factors, but how? How do you actually do it in the real world? Let's open up the toolkit and see how compensation pros actually put a value on a job. One of the most common and solid tools they use is called the point method. The whole idea here is to bring some objectivity to a subjective process. So instead of just ranking jobs from best to worst, you're actually assigning a numerical point score to every single one. And here's basically how it works. First, you pick a few well-understood jobs to act as your anchors, your benchmarks. Then, you take those compensatable factors, like responsibility, and break them down into levels, low, medium, high. And here's the crucial step. You decide how much weight each factor gets. Maybe responsibility is worth way more points than working conditions. Once that whole scoring system is built, you can run every single job in the company through it. I know. That was a lot of process, right? Deconstructing jobs, assigning points. It sounds like a ton of work. So you have to ask, why even bother? What's the big payoff? Well, that's what this last section is all about. Well, for one thing, it's just plain smart strategy. It makes sure that the jobs you say are most important to the company's success are actually the ones you pay the most. It aligns pay with priorities. Now, the trade-off is that these systems can sometimes get a little rigid, maybe a bit bureaucratic, and they can be slow to adapt if the outside market for a certain job suddenly goes nuts. But honestly, the single biggest reason companies do all this is for legal compliance. Having a well-documented, objective system is their number one legal shield. It's what allows them to defend why there are pay differences between jobs, to figure out who is eligible for overtime pay, and even to define a job's essential duties for disability accommodations. Without this system, they're just exposed. So let's circle all the way back to that chart from the beginning. Those big jumps in pay, they weren't random at all. They were the result of a deliberate, sometimes complex system. A system that's designed to be strategic, to be seen as fair, and most of all, to be legally defensible. And that kind of leaves us with a big final question, doesn't it? This whole system was built for a world where jobs were pretty clearly defined. But in our world, with remote work, the gig economy, and AI taking over tasks, what are the compensable factors of the future? How are we going to define the value of a job when the very meaning of a job is changing right under our feet?